I want to tell a story about top-down brute force government overreach. But it's also a story about people resisting such things and asserting their right to govern themselves locally and do things their own way and be left the hell alone. And though it's a story that takes place between 110 and 130 years ago, I think you'll find it contains, as most historical stories do, echoes of many of the same issues that we find ourselves wrestling with in the present day, insofar as trying to find the proper balance between central government power and popular sovereignty exercised at the state and local level. So what's the story about? It's about Pittsburgh. Specifically, the spelling of Pittsburgh, specifically the H on the end of Pittsburgh, which the federal government tried to take away and kept trying to take away for over 20 years. But eventually, they had to give it back because the people of Pittsburgh said, damn it, we like our H. We are keeping our H. The feds have no right to dictate to us how we are to spell the name of our own city, and this is a hill we are fully prepared to die on. But before we get to that point, let's step back in time and quickly set up the scene. The first European settlers to arrive in the area where the city of Pittsburgh now stands were the French in the early 1750s. They built a fort on the site named Fort Duquesne, which they occupied for only a few years before losing it to the British during the 7 Years' War. The first recorded reference to Pittsburgh as the name of that place is contained in a 1758 letter from General John Forbes to William Pitt the Elder, in which General Forbes is clearly trying to kiss the ass of one of the most powerful government ministers of the day by suggesting, you know, this is a pretty nice place we've captured from the Frenchies. What say we call it Pittsburgh in your very own honor, sir? And Pitt, well, he thought that was a pretty good suggestion, and so Pittsburgh it became, except it almost certainly wasn't pronounced that way, at least not at first, because when British people, or people of British extraction, used the B-U-R-G-H suffix, it is always pronounced borough. So it's reasonable to surmise that at the time of the name change, and for some time afterward, all the locals called the place Pittsburgh. But at some point, the local phonology changed, and people switched to calling it Pittsburgh with the hard G sound on the end. And the reason why probably has much to do with the influx of German immigrants to the area beginning in the mid-19th century. A native German speaker would never look at B-U-R-G-H and say borough. They would just say Berg in the German fashion, and both suffixes mean the same thing anyway. B-U-R-G-H is from the Anglo-Saxon, and B-U-R-G is from High Germanic, but each has the original meaning of referring to a hillside fort. So there would occasionally be some confusion among out-of-towners on the correct pronunciation of the city's name, but by the time you get to the 1870s, 1880s, it's a matter of near unanimous agreement among the locals that it's pronounced Pittsburgh in the Germanic fashion, but it's spelled in the British fashion. But there were other places in the country where other such things were starting to become a legitimate problem, and this goes back again to the different naming conventions employed by English, Scots, Irish immigrants on the one hand and Germanic Scandinavian immigrants on the other hand, respectively. If a new town was named by people of British extraction, they would use B-U-R-G-H, and the correct pronunciation would be borough. If it was named by people of Germanic or Scandinavian extraction, they would use B-U-R-G, and the correct pronunciation would be Berg. Except there's really no way of standardizing these things when you're in the mid-19th century, so it didn't take long for people to start playing fast and loose with the spellings and the pronunciations. And this started getting to be a real annoyance for the Postal Service, especially in states where, for example, you might have one town called Jonesburg and another town called Jonesboro. And people might be using both spellings interchangeably. They might not know any better. So if you're the guy at the post office, you might have a letter in your hand with a fully legible printed address on it, but you've only got a coin flip's chance of sending it to the correct place. So the Postal Service decides, doggone it, this situation is intolerable. We need to establish a binding nationwide naming convention so this doesn't happen anymore. But then they quickly realized, shit, we don't have the legal authority to do any such thing. But don't let that trouble you, because we are the U.S. government, and we know there is no problem that can't be solved by creating a brand new shiny federal bureaucracy. And so was born in some deep dark corridor of the Department of the Interior, the United States Board on Geographic Names, an agency which still exists to this day because, of course it does, and is empowered to dictate the manner in which cities and counties and towns may spell their own place names. But it was created really to just solve a single problem, and that is what to do about this whole B-U-R-G-H versus B-U-R-G conundrum. And this was the solution they came up with. They said, all right, next year's 1891, we're going to throw a dart at the calendar. We're going to pick a day. That day is going to be your deadline. Before that date, each town needs to decide if they want to be a borough or a burg. If it's the former, then you will change the spelling to B-O-R-O. If it's the latter, you will change the spelling to B-U-R-G. If there is an H on the end, you will drop it. Uncle Sam has spoken. And nobody really complained about it, except Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh said, there's not really any need for that here. We like the way our city name is spelled. Everybody is aware of the incongruous pronunciation, and it doesn't cause any problems for anybody. So, can we just opt out of this thing and not participate? And then the USBGN says, what part of we are the U.S. government and you will obey do you assholes in Pittsburgh not understand? I feel like you guys need a refresher on how top-down brute force one-size-fits-all national policy making actually works. Suffice it to say, it is not a thing that you get to opt out of. So you will drop your H, and you will like it. Do I make myself clear? And so for the next 20 years, the federal government refused to acknowledge the H at the end of Pittsburgh's name, while Pittsburghers themselves kept on using it as a matter of principle. But finally, at long last, the government blinked, and they said, you know what? Screw it. Fine. If the stupid H is that important to you, then have your stupid H. It was July 1911 when the central government officially dropped its objection to Pittsburgh's H, a date which is still celebrated as H Day by the local denizens, and not just the smack junkies either. And if you ever wondered why Pittsburgh is the only U.S. city whose name ends in B-U-R-G-H, well, now you know. And what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is passive resistance works. You just have to be patient and committed and secure in the knowledge of your own moral righteousness. You have to believe in your position more doggedly than the asshole bureaucrat in Washington believes in his position. And sure, maybe it takes 20 years to wear the bastards down. But wear down they will. You just have to make them. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, currently rated number 2 on TripAdvisor for authentic medieval B&Bs with no running water or indoor plumbing. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. And do you remember that movie, The Men Who Stare at Goats? I want to say it's about 12 to 15 years old. It's got George Clooney, Kevin Spacey, Ewan McGregor, Jeff Bridges. And it's the story of a secret military psyops project, one component of which is the goal of brainwashing and propagandizing foreign populations so effectively that you can invade and conquer their country while having them view you as innocuous, friendly, benevolent liberators. And I want to read this passage from the movie, which is delivered by Lynn Cassidy, the character played by Ewan McGregor. Quote, while recovering in the hospital, Bill wrote to the Vice Chief of Staff for the Army, explaining that he wanted to go on a fact-finding mission to explore alternative combat tactics. The Pentagon agreed to pay his salary and expenses. What Bill hadn't told the Pentagon was that he was really looking for the answer to his vision. How could his men's gentleness, their general lack of interest in killing people, be turned into a strength? How could love and peace help win wars? Bill knew where to go to find out. Bill disappeared into the New Age movement for 6 years. Like all shaman before him, he had traversed the wilderness. Now he was returning to his people a changed man. He brought with him his confidential report, which he called the New Earth Army Manual. The New Earth Army is a banner under which the forces of good can gather. The courage and nobility of the warrior blended with the spirituality of the monk. The Jedi warrior will follow in the footsteps of the great Imagineers of the past, Jesus Christ, Lao Tse Tung, Walt Disney. The role of the New Earth Army is to resolve conflict worldwide. Jedis will parachute into war zones, utilizing sparkly eyes technique, carrying symbolic flowers and animals, playing indigenous indigenous music and words of peace. End quote. I find myself reflecting on that movie more and more lately, and not just because of the screamingly obvious parallels with Joe Biden's Russia proxy war, which was largely precipitated by Americans trying to turn Ukraine into an Eastern European outpost of woke leftist radicalism. And I also think of the image of our U.S. diplomats raising the gay transgender pride flag over our embassy in Kabul less than 90 days before our botched withdrawal from Afghanistan, in which 13 of our servicemen were needlessly killed and $87 billion worth of weapons, vehicles, and equipment was left behind for no goddamn good reason. The point being, you and I grew up in a world where imperialist ambitions were carried out at the point of a sword with the butt of a rifle. But today, when the imperialists descend from the skies, they come not bearing the weapons of war, but rather rainbow flags and feather boas, carrying symbolic flowers and animals, playing indigenous music and words of peace. In other words, the new 21st century model of conquest is dressed up in the costume of a gay pride festival and speaks the language of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not just foreign countries they're trying to conquer either. Make no mistake about that. Because the woke legions absolutely will not rest until every city council and every school board from sea to shining sea is safely in the hands of wild-eyed, lunatic, wokester sex perverts who pass out butt plugs to 14-year-olds. Well, shit, I've gone and mentioned that, haven't I? So I guess now it has to be dealt with. There's a good chance you've probably seen or heard the video last week from James O'Keefe, who is the most important investigative journalist of this century. But if you haven't seen or heard it, I'm not going to play it. And not just because the video would probably get pulled down if I did. I just can't play something that disgusting and revolting on this program in good conscience. So you will thus have to take my word for it when I tell you it's a hidden camera video of a school administrator from the number 2 most expensive private school in Chicago bragging that he gave out dildos and butt plugs to minor children along with instructions in their use. Moreover, he went on to describe this as literally the best part of my job. That's a direct quote. And he gets very extremely graphic in his descriptions of what he told the children to do with the sex toys that he had distributed to them. It is really plainly evident that this guy very much enjoys talking to children about sticking things up their butts. Now, if we lived in a sane world, hell, if this had happened 5 years ago, this disgusting pedophile sex pervert would be in custody without bail, facing a whole litany of felony child abuse charges. In a sane world, the response from this man's employer would have been, "We have fired the disgusting pedophile sex pervert with immediate effect, and we will assist the authorities in any way we can in seeing that he is prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." But alas, we don't live in a sane world. So you've probably already guessed with a fair degree of accuracy what the school's response was when their employee was caught on video talking about how totally awesome it is giving out sex toys to 9th graders. Yeah, he is the innocent victim of a right-wing smear campaign. This is a coordinated assault by super-duper ultra-mega-maga Republicans upon the LGBTEIEIO community. We stand in total solidarity with Butt Plug Man, and we hope he passes out even bigger butt plugs next week, because that'll show those filthy, evil, intolerant Trumpers. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is a real thing that happened in the United States of America in the year 2022, and I will just ask the question out loud. Is there anything about this that should redound to a left-wing versus right-wing shouting match? Shouldn't there be nothing whatever to disagree about here? Shouldn't every grown adult with a functioning prefrontal cortex be able to conclude, yeah, administrators instructing high school students in sex toy usage, that's bad. So how about let's all agree we don't support that? But that isn't what happened. Instead, we get, this is a right-wing attack against the LGBT community. And I really have to wonder how well they thought through that response before they issued it, because haven't they now implied that all gay people are in favor of school administrators passing out butt plugs to adolescents? I mean, is that something you really want to have implied? Because it seems kind of homophobic to me. When you construct an argument that suggests all non-straight people approve of schools being used as meat markets for groomers and pedophiles. In fact, I will go out on a limb and assert my firm belief that not all gay people are in favor of the Butt Plugs for Tykes holiday giveaway program. So I guess we're left with this question. Have we gone so far off the deep end of collective madness, so far overboard with the mandatory celebrations of all things sexually non-normative, that we can't even agree any longer that actual child sex predators, which this guy is, should lose their jobs and go to jail? We as a society have lost our moral center that profoundly that we can't bring ourselves to be unanimously condemnatory toward people who use their positions of authority in schools to engage in sexual predations against minor children? That is where we are now? I think Joe Biden would be barking mad if he heard about that. Well, not Joe Biden today, mind you, but 2006 Joe Biden would be. You may have seen this bit of video. Tucker Carlson played it last night, and pretty much everybody else has played it today, but it's a clip of Joe Biden, the senior senator from Delaware, as he was then, mocking the whole idea of gay marriage. And look, if you haven't seen the video yet, and you wonder what I'm talking about when I say today's Republicans are to the left of where Democrats were 15 years ago, this video is a good object lesson for you. It is Biden saying, we've got a lot of important work to do here in the Senate, but we're going to be debating some stupid gay marriage bill this week? Come on, man! Nobody's ever going to try to legalize gay marriage. Why do you need to ban it? Marriage is between one man and one woman. Everybody knows that. Can't we knock it off with all this silliness and malarkey? So 16 years ago, Senator Joe Biden was so dismissive of the idea of gay marriage that he didn't even consider it a serious subject that warranted the attention of the Congress. Now let's fast forward to yesterday, on the south lawn of the White House, where a whole retinue of drag queens and gender-fluid thises and non-binary that's were on hand to help President Joe Biden celebrate the enshrinement of gay marriage into the United States Code. President Joe Biden, in a marked departure from Senator Joe Biden 16 years ago, gave a speech at this event in which he declared that the most decent, most patriotic, most quintessentially American thing that you can be is gay married. Which is quite a bold statement for an American president to make, don't you think? I mean, since he basically just asserted that men and women who get married and have children, which has been the sole purpose of matrimony for around 100,000 years of human history, are morally inferior to gay married people? And I like to think about how much this must mean to Mayor Pete, as he is sitting in his rocking chair with one infant daughter latched onto each one of his disgusting hairy man boobs. As Chasen strokes his hair and hums gay nursery rhymes in the background, it must mean the world to him, knowing that he is finally seen and heard and appreciated. It was also a great day yesterday for America's second greatest heroine of the high seas, Admiral Danglin' Dick Levine, because it must be a rare treat for him when he is not the only man in a dress on the White House grounds. Oh, wait. It looks like I've gone there, haven't I? So we need to talk about Sam Brinton now, the former Assistant Deputy Undersecretary for some shit to do with nuclear waste. First of all, it is curmudgeon's third commandment of effective governance that if you have multiple qualifiers in your job title, your job does not need to exist. And this evening gown wearing freak, he had 3. So there you go. I continue to stand behind the theory. So the Biden administration hired this guy, who's since been fired, shockingly, knowing he's a dude who likes to show up to work in lipstick and dresses and high heels, knowing that he hosts gay leather spanking fetish seminars on the weekend in his spare time, but it came as a complete shock to everyone that he wound up being a serial kleptomaniac luggage thief? Who would have guessed? There were no red flags at all with this guy. It was completely unexpected. Now, we are all familiar with the old political cliche about throwing red meat to the base, but I think we are seeing the most extreme example of it that we've ever seen in our entire history. There was no threat of gay marriage being banned in any state. It hasn't even been discussed by anyone, but damn it, we need a bit of political theater this week, and we need it pronto. You know why we need it? Because earlier this week, history's first lesbian senator renounced the Democrat Party and became an independent. So I need a whole goddamn bunch of lipstick on this pig, like right now. I want you to pass some kind of pro-gay bill, and I want to have a big White House signing ceremony with every weird, creepy sex pervert who is willing to show up. We need to reassert the fact that we are the weird, creepy sex pervert party. The survival of our coalition depends on it. If I lose the weird, creepy sex pervert vote, the only core constituency I've got left after that is the Civil War veterans. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Have a pleasant tomorrow. I will see you Friday. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.